Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to The Future You, Transforming Research Instincts into a Successful Business. My name is Sophie Rosa, and I'm the Manager of Stakeholder Relations and Outreach at the Canada Foundation for Innovation, or as we typically call it, the CFI. First, I would like to mention that the CFI respectfully recognizes and acknowledges the traditional relationship that the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis across Canada have with the land all Canadians share. Before we get started, I want to tell you just a little bit about the CFI and why we are doing this webinar series. So the CFI is a funding organization that invests in research labs, equipment, and facilities on campuses across the country. This includes everything from DNA sequencers and electron microscopes to larger scale infrastructures like ocean tracking networks and research vessels. So far, we have funded more than 13,000 projects over 28 years. So you can imagine that many of the research projects you can think of in Canada probably uses infrastructure we have funded. The investments we make help us attract top researchers to Canada and equip them to be global leaders in their fields. Access to cutting-edge research labs and tools allow them to respond to emerging challenges like the pandemic, food security, climate change, and so much more. So why are we doing these webinars? Well, the labs we support also serve as incubators, leading to bold entrepreneurial ventures. They are spaces where undergrads and grad students conduct research, meet mentors, and work to evolve their research ideas into thriving businesses. In fact, each of the panelists we have with us today have spent time working in a CFI-funded lab. As an organization, of course, we recognize the value of these opportunities, and we hope to inspire students like you to see the same. So we will be leaving as much time as possible for panelists to answer your question. So if you're thinking of one in particular as you listen to the discussion, please write it in the Q&A section. The icon is at the bottom of your screen. And we will try to get to as many of these as possible during the time we have. Now, over to our moderator, Jon French. Jon is the director of University of Toronto Entrepreneurship, where he is responsible for supporting and championing all entrepreneurship initiatives across the university's 3 campuses. So he's very well positioned to lead this discussion today with our 4 young entrepreneurs. Without further ado, over to you, Jon.
Terrific. Thank you, Sophie. And good afternoon or good morning, I guess, depending on which part of the country you're in to everyone. As Sophie mentioned, I have the pleasure of leading the entrepreneurship ecosystem at the University of Toronto, where we have 12 innovation hubs or campus accelerators. As an example, we've got a deep tech accelerator called UTest. We have a wet lab incubator called Spin Up. And when I heard about the opportunity to moderate this panel, I jumped at it because quite often we'll find that entrepreneurs, students, researchers, faculty either won't know where to go on campus or what resources to plug into, or they're guilty of doing it too late in the game. And so we have 4 incredible entrepreneurs, panelists to speak to you today, to give you some advice, to inspire you, and to help point you in the right direction. And as Sophie mentioned, there will be an opportunity for Q&A, so make sure that you drop those questions into the Q&A box. I'm going to briefly introduce our 4 panelists and then ask them to share a little bit about their entrepreneurial journey. And so thrilled to have, first off, Brock Schumann joining us, who's the CEO of Azor Biotech in Victoria, BC. Azor leverages AI and high-throughput robotics to design microRNA targeting small molecules. Welcome, Brock. We have Harsh Rathford, also from Victoria, BC, who's the co-founder and CEO of Nericsson. Nericsson is leading one of the province's fastest growing startups, serving clients like BC Hydro, Ontario Power Generation, and major airports in 6 countries to ensure the safety of bridges, dams, and other critical infrastructure. Welcome, Harsh. We have Kritika Tyagi, who is a Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree, a U of T alumni, and the co-founder of Earthos, based out of Toronto, where she merges her expertise in ecology and plant biology with manufacturing tech to innovate biomaterials. Welcome, Kritika. And last but not least, we have Ravi Kampaya, who is the CEO at Zen Energy, based out of Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Zen Energy is innovating and commercializing long-lasting batteries for electric vehicles and energy storage systems. Welcome, Ravi, and thanks for representing the East Coast. I'm going to hand it over to each of our entrepreneurs to share a brief overview of their entrepreneurial journey. And I'll ask each of you to focus on where and what you studied. Tell us a little bit about your company and the impact it's having on the sector or on the customers that you served. And also for the audience, what inspired you to take what you were working on kind of as a research project and turn it into a company? Brock, you're up first. Take it away.
All right. Well, thank you very much, John. Yeah, I'm Brock, and I got my PhD at the University of Victoria. It's a small university. My PhD was in biochemistry, where I studied structural biology. And, I'd always been interested in the practical applications of biochemistry, especially drug development. So I went on to do a series of postdocs in Toronto. This included for some startup companies as well as some research hospitals. And that kind of helped foster this interest in leading my own entrepreneurial journey. So my postdocs kind of culminated in looking at microRNA as biomarkers of disease states. And I thought, well, they seem like they should be able to be really good drug targets as well. And looking into how other people were trying to target them with small molecules, I felt that I could do a lot better. And I think that's probably, the origin story of a lot of entrepreneurs, is thinking that you have the kind of unique skill set to address a problem. So I started from there, and I had no real business background. I was one of the people who joined on to the University of Toronto Business in Life Science applications too late. So I got a taste of the resources that were available, but probably would have benefited from joining them earlier. And yeah, I started doing the practical things first, seeing if I thought I could write an API to use AI. My first fundings, I think that'll be a lot of questions for a lot of people. I first started getting funding to do practical things through NRC IRAP, which is a great program, one of the easier ones to apply. And it was a learning journey, and I can't say I've mastered it, learning how to separate funders if you're looking for non-dilutive funding, separating funders from their money. I've been successful, but wouldn't say I'm an expert, and it was a big learning journey. And a big part of the problem I felt was that you were no longer, because I was a confident public speaker to educate, but that's not really what you're trying to do when you're trying to get funding. So anyway, it was a bit of a transition, and Azor is doing really well now. We're bringing some we've got funding for some really high throughput robotics that we're giving back to the community. We're bringing it into the University of Victoria. And yeah, I think that's good for now. Thanks.
Terrific. Great start. Thank you, Brock. And before I turn it over to you, Harsh, I'm just noticing questions already popping up in the Q&A, which is great. And whether it's through the course of the chat or towards the end, either myself or the CFI team will be able to share some of the resources that get highlighted. I think Brock was mentioning the IRAP program, which is one of many excellent ones. Okay, Harsh, over to you to tell us your story.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Harsh Rathore, CEO and co-founder of Nericsson. I was born and raised in India, came to Canada in 2014 to actually do my master's thesis. So I spent about a year in Canada. Then in 2015, I actually got a great opportunity to work on a really cool project where the idea was combining robotics and computer vision to solve some of the infrastructure inspection related problems. So for those who don't understand the whole inspection aspect, I'll just give you a high level overview. So, you're seeing all these large bridges, dams, nuclear power plants, airstrips, buildings around you, and the inspection of these assets really, done with old methodology. So civil engineers or technicians go out there in the field with pen, paper, and hammer, and then go out there and try to identify all the distresses. They map everything with pen and paper, draw literally on the paper, and then put that whole thing into the report form. And then again, every couple of years, these reports actually are changing, and then they try to compare the reports. In addition, actually, they also go with hammer, and then they try to tap the concrete surface with a hammer, and then try to listen to the sound. And based on the sound difference with the subjective trained human ears, they'll be able to tell that, okay, whether there's any issues or not. So what I wanted to do as part of my PhD, which is about 4.5 years lasted, the idea was, okay, can we actually try to eliminate human component from the beginning and then really focus on the human component in the analysis part? So utilize robotics and computer vision to actually automate and digitize end-to-end condition assessment. So drone will automatically fly and capture the data, multi-layer data, and we invented a technology where drone is actually doing the tapping and capturing the sounding data. And we, superimpose this data set onto each other and create the iteration model and see how it's tracking. So now it's objective, it's much more safer, it's more cost effective, much more faster, and it's scalable, right? So right after I got out of my PhD program, I actually approached one of the customers in BC and pitched this idea, and we got the PO right off the bat. And then I actually graduated with the PO almost, and we deployed the technology, and we got really good results. We compared the technology with the manual traditional method. And after the success, we started expanding into other parts of Canada, then in the United States, Australia, New Zealand, India, and now in the UK. In fact, I'm in Scotland right now, expanding into Scotland. Then we actually got really good traction in the bridge market and also airfield market. So right now, we are about 47 people around the globe running the operation in about 6 countries. I have a lot of things to share, but we'll dive into different components later in the webinar.
Terrific. Thanks, Harsh. I'm glad you mentioned the size of your team and that you're distributed. That was going to be one of my questions as well. Next up, Kritika, tell us a little bit about yourself and the Earthos journey.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Kritika, and I'm the head of product and co-founder at Earthos. So my journey actually began as a plant biology student at the University of Toronto, where my co-founder Nuha, who has a background in business, and I met while working at a social entrepreneurship club called Enactus. So it was actually there where we came across a World Economic Forum report that said that by 2050, there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean by weight. And this was around the year of 2016. And we were really starting to see the boom of e-commerce and all of the packaging that was coming in with each product that we were purchasing. And so we decided that we really wanted to challenge that statistic and do something about it. So Earthos actually began as a project that was focused on leveraging plant-based materials to replace packaging, things like packing peanuts. And we were lucky enough to be connected with the incredible folks at U of T Entrepreneurship, who not only guided us, but connected us to vital resources that allowed us to grow from, a simple research project to an incorporated startup. In about 2018, we actually went through the CDL, the Creative Destruction Lab program, where we met our first investor. And we decided to leverage our first pre-seed funding to buy one-way tickets to Asia, where we set up endless meetings with manufacturers and plastic companies to really understand why plant-based materials weren't being more adopted in the supply chain. So we spent a year learning about how it's not the actual application that's the problem, but rather the plastic inputs themselves. And that's really where we made our first pivot. We began leveraging our ingredients database to start designing unique blends to replace plastic resins for different single and multi-use plastic applications. Unlike other bioplastics or materials, we're actually functional and, more importantly, compatible with existing plastic infrastructure. And so instead of us having to reinvent the wheel, we were actually able to work hand in hand with manufacturers to replace these toxic chemicals and plastics in their supply chain. Since then, we've had a few successful projects, one of which was actually with AB InBev with their Budweiser line, where we launched the world's first compostable keg cap in India. And since then, we've actually been doing custom projects with major CPGs. Today, Earthos is a post-Series A company where we're leveraging our almost decade of research to develop internal machine learning algorithms, which allow us to expedite our research processes. And this has allowed us to design and deliver novel formulation blends to CPGs in record time. We've shortened timeframes of as long as 18 months of research and development to about 6 to 8 months. Throughout this journey, we've had incredible advocates such as Jon, who've not only cheered on Earthos throughout our growth, but have been incredibly supportive in pushing plant-based solutions to the forefront. And we're on a mission to prove that bio-based materials can truly replace harmful, toxic plastics at scale. And I'm just really excited to be here and speak more about our journey today.
Thank you, Kritika, and for the kind words. I honestly didn't ask her to say that for everybody watching, but you can already see one of the theme across the first three panelists, and that's leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning to do good, whether it's drug discovery, new materials, leveraging computer vision when looking at dams and runways, etc. So it might be a theme that we come back to as the conversation evolves. And now I'll hand it over to Ravi to tell us about Zen Energy and your story.
Thanks, Jon. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here, and good afternoon to everyone who is on the other side. My journey started. I grew up in India, and then I moved to Canada in 2010 to work on my master's at the University of Waterloo, where I studied nanotechnology. And then I spent about 10 years working in the US for my other master's in research and PhD. What really led, throughout this journey of 10, 12 years, I never thought I would be an entrepreneur. I always thought I would be a faculty or a professor or researcher somewhere. And what really led me to this journey was my experience in the US. I was in Maryland, I was at Purdue, and then Chicago. Public transport was pretty bad in many of these places, and you are almost as a student handicapped to go anywhere. Either you have to take an Uber. Back then there was not enough Ubers then. So I was looking for an alternative, and as a student I could not afford a car. So I started looking at alternatives. Then I came across electric bicycles. This was back in 2013, very early days. And that led to my journey into electric mobility. I first got my electric bicycle, and then I started building electric bicycles. And then I realized, wow, the batteries and electric mobility is really catching on. And then I moved to Canada, and again in 2021 for my postdoc at Dalhousie University, working with Professor Jeff Dawn. I'm not sure many know this. Dalhousie University is the only university in the world to have an exclusive partnership with Tesla, and it is considered the battery mecca. And I got to work with this really a visionary professor called Jeff Dawn, and he supported this product, the technology. And then we came up with an idea: why not start making electric bicycles, and then see how we can support the bigger market. So that's how the journey started. When I came to Canada, I had no idea how to register a company, how to go through this whole process of fundraising. So I was fortunate to be part of some of the programs, whether it's Creative Destruction Lab or Lab to Market. Lab to Market is a great program that any aspiring entrepreneur could make use of. And then CDL is another great program. You learn a lot from these. So that's how I learned some of the fundamentals. And then, you just get into the whole process. You start understanding how to really build a product, fundraise. So Zen Energy is now, we started as an electric bicycle manufacturing company. Now we're focused on manufacturing battery packs for electric mobility, whether it is mopeds, motorcycles, three-wheelers in Asia, or drones. And we have about 7 members in Dartmouth, and then we're setting up R&D and manufacturing in India, high volume manufacturing, where we will be manufacturing batteries for all the electric scooters, electric bicycles that you see in Canada, as well as the US market. The goal is to make these batteries last. And if these batteries can last 8 years, most people will switch to electric vehicles or electric mopeds or motorcycles in other countries. And that's the real goal. How can we make this last 10 years so more people can switch and then we can reduce the carbon footprint? We also are deploying battery packs into swap stations in high density areas in Asia, which is Delhi, Bombay, where you can swap the battery in 30 seconds. So again, as John said, we are now leveraging advanced algorithms and machine learning prediction models to understand and how we can improve the lifetime of these batteries. So happy to be part of this panel and share my journey, and look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ravi. How big is your team right now?
So about 7 members in Canada and then another 8 members in India right now.
Beautiful. Thank you. And thanks to the CFI team. I was going to say you've heard some additional programs be mentioned for those of you that are listening, trying to figure out where to turn for support, commercializing research that you might be working on. The Lab to Market program, which has connections to Dalhousie, TMU, SFU, and then also the Creative Destruction Lab, which started out of Rotman at the University of Toronto, but now has streams and chapters across the country and other parts of the world, including the Rockies, in Vancouver, in Halifax at Dalhousie, in Montreal with HEC, and really unique streams focused on deep tech, whether that's advanced materials, space, several streams in the healthcare space, artificial intelligence, quantum, so great resources to check out. I'm going to go back to Harsh, and you kind of mentioned the pivotal moment or the inspiration a little bit in your intro, but can you talk a little bit more about that pivotal moment and also where you turned as an innovator for support from either the university or others that were right around you?
Yeah, no, thank you. So I was a couple of years into my PhD, and I think I figured out at that time that okay, what the framework looked like, in terms of how to capture the data and how to actually turn this data into kind of meaningful information for structural engineers. So I knew that I'm going somewhere, but at that time I was still not sure that this is going in the commercialization direction, right? So then there was an incident happen back home in India where bridge failure happened, and some of my family members used to travel across that bridge, pretty much every other day. On that day, they were fortunate that they actually didn't travel, but there were 28 other people who died, right? And I actually got really shocked when I saw the news, and I was trying to connect with my family members, and afterwards I kind of realized that yes, even though my family wasn't part of that, but there were other people died, and I think if you look at it, every year there is some disasters happening, and I think most importantly that this disaster is not just limited to India. I think aging infrastructure problem is now almost getting to kind of a majority of the earth, or majority of the countries, because most of the infrastructure is built in 60s and 70s, so kind of going into the end of their lifespan, particularly if you look at the United States and of course some of the European infrastructure. So I thought that there was a great opportunity for us to do something here, and given the fact that I already made significant progress, and I think Canada was probably the best country to start this journey from, because I think there's just too many opportunities that I could see at that time, and I was like, okay, let's really start leveraging this kind of the moment and the fire that I had at that time, and convert that into some sort of contracts and investment, right? So I mean, I was a geeky researcher. I had no idea how to talk with investor, right? So actually that's where I felt that the university's incubator program supported me a lot, actually. I had no idea. So some of the basic stuff, I would just go, probably Jerome is listening here. So I would go to Jerome, and he's the director of Costa Capital Savings Innovation Center at the University of Victoria. Fantastic person. And I would just go to him and, ask some stupid question. He's an engineer, so he understands what the engineer thinks about. I had no idea even what the cap table was. Like, some of the investors initially asked me, hey, do you have a cap table? I'm checking on Google as a researcher, what the heck is a cap table, right? So some of those basic things I had to learn, because who teaches cap table to an engineer, right? So had to figure out everything on my own, but again, the university helped quite a bit. But then I also realized that, university alone can't do this. We have to really go outside and, get outside support. I think CDL was another, support that was, of course, introduced by the university. So I was able to really go through the CDL program and, got a couple of investors actually invested in our first round. So that was also a huge moment for us. But, John, you probably can appreciate this because a lot of entrepreneurs come to you. Every day there are punches, right, on your face. So, you really need to handle those punches. And I had a lot of punches every day, still getting a lot of punches. But I think when you are on a mission to solve something, I think you can take those punches. And, there are a lot of great things also happening that motivates you along the way, but there will always be punches that we have to remember. But these punches really make you really strong when you are on a mission for something, and you can take those. Yeah, I'll limit to this. I can keep talking, but I'll let others talk.
Thanks, Harsh. And I can see that Jerome is on the call. So hi, Jerome. Thanks for joining us and for all you do for the ecosystem as well. I'm going to shift to Brock for a second. Brock, in your comments, you talked about, for a while at least, in the early days, having access to some of the equipment. And Sophie talked about some of the lab equipment that CFI makes accessible. How was that helpful? What did you have access to? And then was there pain when all of a sudden it might not have been there in the same way? And any sort of advice to aspiring entrepreneurs that are thinking about access to physical spaces, equipment, labs, etc.?
Yeah, I think this is extremely applicable to any life science. You really need, if you wanted to set up a fully operational lab, you really need about $500,000 to set everything up. So it was great when I was, a postdoc and had access to all these great resources. And it was a bit of a lot of them you can get through just outsourcing. There are lots of labs in Canada and abroad that you can do it through. It is sometimes, you can't leverage that as well as you can having your own, material equipment. And it was a learning experience too, in that a lot of the high throughput robotics that we were using, and I was using it hands-on, so I could see areas where there was a lot of room for improvement for, our own robotics that we started bringing in. So yeah, it's like, make sure to take full advantage of the resources available to you. And so this is something that made it more difficult for me because I wasn't a academic spin-off. So if you are an academic spin-off, you'll usually still have access to a lot of those. And there are a lot of resources in Canada that I'm not intimately familiar with that can help support academic spin-offs. But it's just something to keep in mind, that you'll have to have those partnerships moving forward who can do the stuff you can't as a startup.
Well said. And Kritika, similar question to you, but are you able to maybe share about the early days of Earthos and what you had access to, and then also the evolution to the facility that you have now and what that process was like?
Yeah, I think very similar story to kind of what Brock shared. When we were in our research days, it was a very unique position where, we were working on more of a hypothesis validation mode to understand, can plant-based materials even be used to replace traditional plastics? And when we incorporated and actually started working more on an industry pace, we realized that, we were short on resources, we were short on time, and things were a lot faster paced and more demanding. And so a lot of the work that we ended up doing kind of in the early days was understanding how we can be more creative, and kind of make the most of the situation we were in. And so kind of in the very beginning of our story, we actually started looking for more strategic partnerships. And so folks who could really step in and support us from a resource perspective. And we actually ended up working with Lambton College. And they had a CFI funded lab, which is where a lot of our research really blossomed. We were actually able to team up with their biomaterials manufacturing team to start to understand and work out how we can make plant-based materials really scale. Unfortunately, moving out of research mode also meant that we were on our own when it came to major expenses, and buying custom equipment to manufacture plant-based materials was totally out of the question for us in the first year and a half of our operating journey. And so when we first started working with Lambton College, we were pretty limited to using what they had available at the time, which were traditional plastic extruders. And we were starting to see so many challenges just pile up in terms of trying to make these materials work. And sometimes our starches, for instance, would burn or degrade before they would even make it out of the machinery. And so we were finding ourselves at a crossroad where, you know, we could either be disheartened or we could use this as an opportunity to be creative. And we decided to keep going and to try and figure out how we can scale these biomaterials on existing plastic manufacturing lines. I'm not going to lie, it was definitely an uphill battle. And there were times when Nuha, my co-founder, would be elbows deep in our mixture trying to figure out how to make our blends work. And we were staying up all night trying to figure out how to successfully get, you know, even one good trial run. And ultimately it did pay off where, you know, today our materials have perfect compatibility to traditional manufacturing equipment lines. We were able to really scale and build materials that act as a true drop-in replacement to traditional plastics. And it's all because we faced these challenges and constraints really early on in our startup journey. I would say it also really helped us with a mindset shift where we now really try to look at challenges through a creative lens and always try to see how we can really make it work for us. And I would say it's definitely played a role in our growth and our journey to where we are today, because it allowed us to really understand what kind of resources were even available to startups where we knew that we didn't have to do a lot of it alone. Some of the opportunities were mentioned by Brock. We also work with NSERC, looking at funding like Shred. So really making the most of what the startup landscape in Canada looks like and the opportunities available to us, and understanding that, you know, we had a lot of support in that journey very early on.
Perfect. Not to put you on the spot, but are you comfortable explaining what Shred is to anybody who's hearing about it for the first time?
Yeah, so Shred is actually a wonderful program that I would highly recommend to any founder that's eligible. But essentially what it does is it gives us tax credits for any of the research work that we're doing. And so there's a lot of research work happening all the time at Earthos. And what it allows us to do is actually get tax credits for the hours that we've spent on actually doing a lot of this research and development. And so in a way, it allows us to kind of get some of that money that we've spent on doing research back, so that we can continue putting that money back into all of the research work that we're doing.
Perfect. Thank you. And my last question before going to Ravi, how big is the Earthos team now, and where is everyone located?
Yeah, so we're actually all located in Mississauga. So we actually ended up coming back to, like I'd mentioned in my intro, we kind of booked one-way tickets to Asia. We came back the weekend before borders closed, before COVID, and we realized we actually really wanted to set up our headquarters here. And so we have a facility that's state of the art in Mississauga. It's very close to the airport, so very convenient. And we now now have a team of just under 20 individuals today. It's a split between, R&D engineers, material scientists, polymer scientists, and some really creative, wonderful folks on kind of the business and operational side of things.
Fantastic. Thank you. And excited to hear that you've been able to do it in Mississauga and build it out in Canada. And I know for entrepreneurs that are looking to commercialize research, sometimes that's the case, and sometimes there's a physical footprint or work that's done outside of the country. And so for Ravi and Harsh, the same question around kind of your journey. But Ravi, you talked about being able to tap into the domain expertise on batteries at Dell and the equipment that's there. What were you able to leverage in the early days? And then now, what are you using when it comes to access to equipment, labs, what's happening in Canada versus other parts of the world?
Sure. There are pockets in Canada that are extremely good, truly world class. And if you are in one of those pockets, whether it's in Ontario, BC, or East Coast, you can really, go get to the global markets. Ultimately, every startup that starts in Canada has to compete at the global level. Programs like NRC, SRED, SHRED, and then Lab to Market, CDL are all great, but the real challenge is to scale beyond and then really hit the global standards and compete against those companies. And what I see is that one, the geopolitical situation in the world is now forcing onshoring and then creating resiliency within the countries. And we are fortunate to be able to build upon this and build kind of like a battery hub in Canada. So there's going to be a Canadian Battery Innovation Center at Dalhousie University. We're going to be part of that. And we leveraged a lot of the research facilities and the know-how from Dal to build our products. And now we are in the US market, now we're getting into the Asian market. But the innovation that our Canadian ecosystem can churn out is really key because you have great universities, University of Waterloo, Toronto, McGill, and so on and so forth. And if you're able to latch on to a very practical problem, then the innovation ecosystem is fantastic. And especially the support system available in Canada compared to the Bay Area. You have so many programs from whether it's NRC or local provincial governments, SHRED, and so on and so forth. So for the first 2 years at least, you can leverage on those and then use the facilities at universities to build your innovative product, and then go to the market where you have we can really demonstrate competitive advantage. So how do I see Canada being a leader in the clean energy space? Well, we produce, Canada is really punching above its weight when it comes to clean energy technology. And with so many electric vehicles coming into the market, I see a big opportunity for Canada to leverage, whether it's electrochemistry, machine learning, manufacturing, that Arthos is doing. So all this coming together, the confluence of this can really put Canada on a global map. So there are pockets. It's not that Canada is absolutely fantastic at everything, but if you find that niche where you can really excel, then you have a fantastic ecosystem here. So using universities and then all this startup ecosystem, whether it's lab to market, CDL, NRC, then going to the global market. That's where I see a pathway and being able to compete in the global markets.
Very well laid out. Harsh, we'll go to you in case there's some other points that you want to make, and then we'll jump into some of the questions that have been shared.
Jon, I think Ravi covered it really well. Maybe we can preserve this time. Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks to the faculty member who shared a question in the Q&A. We'll keep it open to all four of the panelists in case you've got any recommendations. So what suggestions for university-based faculty do you have with regards to training, and I would say inspiring trainees and grad students so that they can make the leap to a startup if they want to? Brock, you had one comment with regards to MyTax, but so I'm going to start with you, but then we'll go around the circle.
Yeah, I neglected to mention MyTax earlier, but that was one program that's, it's applicable throughout Canada, and it's, pretty easy to get if you fall into the criteria they want. So they have some business development training programs that are offered along with it, but the other thing is, they'll pay for half of a postdoc. And so yeah, I think MyTax is a really great program. That's the one I'm most familiar with, but I know that there are similar ones through the NRC. I can't recall what they're called, but there are other similar ones, especially for paying for trainees.
Great point, Brock. In fact, I was a MyTax postdoc myself, and it was a huge support for my company. It's a great program to tackle or get support.
Thanks both. Harsh?
One thing that I want to mention is, grad faculty members, of course, leading research with grad students or, even PhD and postdoc students. I think one of the things probably needs to be streamlined further, because I had faced some issues during my work, is actually the IP arrangement. A lot of times the IP is joint, right? Like, if your professor is owning the IP, or maybe, some of the other students who are working on the research project owning some of the IP, whether it's patented or not, or filed for patent or not. But then, if one of the students or multiple students, wanting to co-found a business, then the IP becomes a little mess, right? So I think that I don't know how much is streamlined, but I think perhaps university can really help to streamline this. I think some of the things that was helpful for me, but I also had to go through some tough conversation, because never easy conversation when we are dealing with IP. So just something that I thought I should highlight, because I've had a whole bunch of students actually in the last couple of years reach out to me just asking the similar question on the IP, that, okay, I don't know who owns the IP. I did the research work together. Then should I just start my work on my own, or how does it work? How do I get the license from the university? How do I negotiate with the university? All of that, those are not the recipes, right? That is written. I think that's where perhaps the incubator comes into the play, CDL comes into the play, and there are, of course, some of the accelerator programs that are out there definitely can help with that. But yeah, I think it would be great to have it streamlined a little bit.
It's an excellent point, Harsh. Before going to you, Kritika, on the first question, do you or does anyone else have any other advice or experience with interacting with your IP or your tech transfer office at your university, or advice to aspiring entrepreneurs, whether they be students or faculty researchers? Okay. Kritika, anything to add on how to advise, inspire the faculty to get their grad students involved in company creation?
Yeah, I think I want to echo a lot of what Hirsch said. I think IP definitely is a really important piece. Something that we did from the very beginning was actually work with academic institutions under grants, because those really help you streamline IP clauses in terms of who owns which piece of IP. And so it allowed us to be very clear on IP ownership from the very beginning. But I think something that I would really encourage that I saw happen quite a bit at U of T was really engaging with the resources that are available on campus around entrepreneurship. I think there's a lot of information that isn't readily available. And I think Hirsch kind of mentioned that around, what is a cap table? And I don't know how to build a cap table. And all of these are challenges that I'm sure everyone at this panel has faced, where we've had to go out and figure out this information, not recognizing that actually a lot of this information is provided through some of the resources at the university. And We realized that when we became a part of U of T Entrepreneurship, where, there's actually a resource hub that you can go into to understand IP requirements, to understand how to actually build your fundraising pitch decks, everything from kind of the smallest minutiae all the way to kind of really understanding how to organize your business. And as grad students, a lot of times, that resource isn't always readily available. And so I would say to really pair these resources along with the research content that's happening, because that way these students can also understand real world applicability of a lot of the work that they're doing, and maybe going into some of their research work with that knowledge in mind or in hand. So I would kind of push more towards that resource side of things.
Excellent. To put a bow on the intellectual property conversation, I think I successfully dropped in a link in the chat to U of T's IP education program, which is accessible online to anyone, not just U of T students. The first level is really around basic IP literacy, just realizing the value of what you create, when it might make sense to reach out to the experts in the IPO, which is our Innovations and Partnerships Office or a Tech Transfer Office. Topics to learn around the university inventions policy, et cetera. And so encourage people to take a look at that and also connect with that equivalent group at your home institution. And then to shift gears a little bit, everybody knows that mentorship is critical to success for an entrepreneur. I'm going to put each of you on the spot and ask if you can highlight one mentor, or it could be an advisor. You can position them how you want, and kind of who they are, whether by name or by general profile, and how they added value either to your company or to you as a founder on your journey. And then also feel free to add any advice for entrepreneurs that are looking to find or build relationships with mentors or domain experts as well. Brock, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to go first.
Okay, yeah, that's good. And I'll say, like, even from a postdoc level, I was always trying to collect as many mentors as possible, which is, I think a good strategy. But I'm gonna answer in a non-conventional way, even though I've had good mentorship from especially my PhD supervisor. I'm going to say that the greatest mentor in the success of my company has been a really good client that I got. So I got a really good client who, laid out, he was okay with me being inexperienced. And so laid out, was I supposed to name him? Oh, okay, this is Brent Loshney, who runs another company doing synthetic chemistry. So he was he was okay with me being naive. He led me to some other clients in his network. And so, there's a large element of serendipity around success, I think. I just met him at a Life Science BC kind of like Christmas party. He liked a joke I told. So a lot of times in the early stages, this part of it is selling yourself, and so be friendly, go to networking events.
Now I want to know what the joke was, but we won't put you on the
It
spot.
had to do with stereochemistry, you kind of had to be there. It's pretty niche.
Excellent, thank you. Ravi, same question over to you.
A great teacher is invaluable in this journey because there are so many hurdles, and then sometimes you don't know what you don't know, with the challenges of fundraising, the challenges of even pitching, and then product, market fit. That is a huge thing. It's one thing to raise money, and then another thing to hit the product market fit and be profitable. So a good mentor is extremely valuable, and you need somebody who is honest and and not so much into the he has to be very rooted in reality, right? It's not you want somebody who's direct, at the same time compassionate, supportive. There's the Canadians are sometimes very too nice. You want somebody who can help you navigate this tough journey as an entrepreneur in the first 6 years. And I was fortunate to work with Dr. Jeff Don. He was an extremely fantastic scientist, and he's 65 or 66 right now. Every day he's in the office from 7:30 to until 4:30, sitting next to postdocs, writing papers. And you have to rub shoulders with the very best to understand what it really takes to be a profitable company. So I would place a huge bet on some of these. And another thing is, in Canada, because of all the support system that you have, sometimes you also find a lot of consultants willing to offer you a lot of advice, and leverage some of these programs. But you need to understand what really gets you to product market fit, and then what sometimes you have to understand sometimes, but you have to still make your own decision. So a good mentor in this to help you scale beyond Series B and go to IPO is an extremely valuable asset. So if you're lucky, you will get it. And I hope everyone is lucky and gets that.
Same question to you, Harsh. Thank you, Ravi.
I think for me, multiple mentors actually along my last 10 years, different phases of my life. I think if you look at initially just during my PhD, I think my Prof. Rishi, great mentor, I think really, inspired me to think outside of box and, be bold and, always supported me. So, again, from the teaching side and, being a professor, fantastic mentor. Then, of course, moving to the kind of the different phase of my life, trying to commercialize this. So multiple mentors came. Of course, I named Jerome, one of the top ones in my list for sure. I think he would just listen to me. I think sometimes you just need somebody to listen, all your frustration. He would do that all day long. And, you need that kind of mentor who can actually just listen to you and understand your emotions and all of that, because you're going through a lot. Then actually, I would say that my board actually is really good. I think I felt like super smart people, both the board members from Stanford and Harvard, and also successful businesses, McKinsey 10 years. So I felt like, okay, I have a lot of stuff to learn from them. They've got quite a bit of experience. One of the board members already gone through IPO and all of that. So I'm still catching up in learnings. Some of my team members actually came from great companies like Intel. One of my team members from Tesla, and he joined Ericsson, and even I was surprised. And he said, "Hey, I would like to join because what you guys are doing is just super cool that Tesla is not doing." And of course, it requires deeper discussion to analyze this particular aspect, what he's trying to communicate. But that is a huge inspiration, and I'm learning a lot from him on some of the decisions he make, and I'm trying to see how I can make those kind of decisions, and how I can frame my decision metrics, and how I can evaluate some of the thoughts that I'm having and all of that. And then CDL and your family members, I think also great mentors to you. So I definitely consider them as also incredible mentors in my journey. So they're just shaping different aspects of myself, and I think not just one mentor, but just so many. John, you're muted if you're saying something.
Had to happen once. Thanks, Harsh. I was just going to say, excellent point on talent and attracting individuals from other larger companies that can add value as mentors and advisors. And we could do a whole separate webinar on the talent piece and competing with top talent. But I'm keeping an eye on the time. Kritika, over to you for a mentor or advisor that's had an impact.
Yeah. So I actually went through this mentorship program early on when we were just solely focused on designing resins, and I came across a couple of different mentors, and I quickly realized mentorship is a little bit like dating in a sense, where you have to find the right mentor that works for you. And what I mean by that is you're learning from this individual, but you're also using them oftentimes as a soundboard. As a founder, there are so many decisions we have to make, and these decisions aren't made in silos. They impact the organization, the individuals that make up your team. And so they can be pretty heavy, some of the decisions that you have to make. And it's so important to have the right mentor that you can kind of pick up the phone and message and ask all of the questions to either get a sanity check or figure out, how they went about the journey that you're currently at the very nascent stages of. And so I actually worked with Dr. Chunyep Pang. He works at Clariant, and he was incredibly helpful in, really kind of helping me feel more comfortable in being a decision maker. And I think that's so key, especially at the very beginning of building your company, because since then I've had to make so many decisions, and being confident and comfortable with making those was definitely a really key skill that I picked up from him. And I would say as founders, when you're looking for mentors, think about what it is that you really want to get out of that mentorship. This is an individual that's offering their time to really support your growth journey. And the best thing that you can do for both yourselves and that individual is to really figure out what it is you want to get out of it, and make sure that you ask a ton of questions. I did that quite a bit, and it ended up being incredibly helpful. We still work with mentors and advisors, and like Hirsch said, they're going to be with you at different parts of your journey. They're going to shape different facets of you, both personally and, as a founder and a leader. And so I would say it never stops. You'll always kind of look at places to find the right type of mentorship, but always kind of keep an eye out on what it is that you really want to get out of that relationship. And these relationships will, last with you forever, and they don't really leave your life for after the mentorship is over.
Kritika, you mentioned that identifying the right mentor can be a little bit like dating. I've heard the same reference made for identifying the right investors also. And we're getting to the top of the hour, but I want to give everybody an opportunity to, in 30 seconds to give a piece of advice or a cautionary tale around raising funding: when, why, how. And so Kritika, I'll put you on the spot to go first this time. 30 seconds on fundraising.
Yeah, I think fundraising is always a really interesting time. And once you fundraise, you're always fundraising. But I would say every investor you meet, figure out what their investment thesis is, and make sure that you're able to really position your startup within that thesis. I think that's the key advice that I would say to every founder. It's something that we learned very early on, especially in our Series A journey, where, a lot of VCs have a very strict thesis in terms of how they invest in companies. And a lot of times it's not immediately clear. And so ask the right questions, really understand what it is. And if you don't see yourself fitting in that investment thesis, then maybe it's not the right relationship for you. But positioning yourself within that investment thesis is really going to make for a more successful series of conversation with whichever investor you're speaking with.
Love it. And the rule is, as I go around the panel, you can't repeat what the person before you said. So, but if you're going last, it's the trickiest. Harsh, you're up next.
I think I would suggest focus on the customers. Investors will follow. I think most of the founders just hung up in the investor cycle and just keep focusing on the investors too much. I would really advise that really focus on the customer and the product, focus on the revenue. And if the revenue is going in the direction that you really want to take, you will find the right investor. And, of course, Kritika mentioned quite a bit of great stuff there. But really emphasize on the customers.
Excellent. I totally agree. Brock?
Yeah, I'd say I did things wrong in that I started pitching to some pretty big people long before I had any idea what investors wanted. I also took too long to consent to give away shares in the company to people who knew what investors wanted and were experienced in pitching to them. So that's my take.
Good points. And last but not least, Ravi.
Sorry, this is regarding the funding situation, is it? Oh.
Yeah. 30 seconds, a piece of advice on when or how to fundraise.
I actually echo what Harsh said. If you find the product market fit, then everything follows. But until you find that product market fit, you have to leverage the great ecosystem Canada has, whether it's lab to market, CDL, accelerators, MyTax. Use it until you hit the product market fit, and always, always benchmark yourself against the global companies. Sometimes it's easy to get stuck in our local ecosystem and say, okay, we have raised so much, but until you start hitting revenue that can break even, that's really the benchmark. So, and what is the best money? It is customers' money, right?
Excellent.
John, just to add quickly 10 seconds here, I think most of the people are probably not aware of the business plan competitions that so many universities in North America offer, and they give out actually $5,000, $10,000. Okay, that could be your first money, actually non-diluting funding, and you almost like gift cash, non-taxable. So you can actually utilize that to hire your first intern. And in fact, that actually comes with great free mentorship, okay, along the way. I pitched to so many competitions, lost so many and won so many, and almost raised like $70,000 just winning the competition while studying, which is great. So I'm actually learning about cap table while studying and also making money to pay my intern. How great is that?
Exactly. And most of those competitions at universities are non-dilutive. U of T is about to have our big $100,000 pitch competition in March. So excellent point, because they're scattered throughout North America. We're going to end by giving you an opportunity to share a piece of advice to potential entrepreneurs on the call. This is scary, this is overwhelming, this is daunting, but it's also very rewarding. And all four of you are examples of entrepreneurs who are making a real impact. And so the question is, what advice do you have for someone who's thinking about taking the leap? And Harsh, we'll stick with you to go first.
Just do it. Don't think, overthink. Just do it.
Okay, the Nike response. I like it. Ravi?
If you really know what it took to scale it to IPO, you may never stop, and that's definitely my case. So I would say just as Harsh said, do it, and you will learn a lot, and it's a really rewarding process. So try it out, and if you win, you'll build a great company. If not, you will come up with an excellent experience.
Yeah. And people think that they have something to lose, but really they don't have anything to lose. They'll only figure that out, after years pass, that they literally had nothing to lose, only to gain. But when you really think about the future, you really ask this question, okay, what if I have something to lose? But it's really not the case.
Well said. Brock?
Oh man. Yeah, like it's rewarding if you're in a position where you can put some time and effort towards doing it. Absolutely, it's very rewarding, and if you have an idea that you think is gonna make you a lot of money, might as well try it out while you can. The best to do it when you're young and you can travel around lots.
Thanks, Brock. And Kritika, bring us home.
I would say figure out what you're really passionate about. It's a rewarding journey, but it's really hard. And if you're not passionate about it, it can burn you out really quickly. So figure out what it is you love, what you're passionate about. And I would say find your own voice. It's key to, really be able to speak to why you and why you're the right person to be building what you're building. So find your voice, find your passion, and I would highly recommend this journey to anyone that loves what they do and thinks they have an idea.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks to all four of our panelists. I love this conversation. We could easily go for another hour easy. So thank you for sharing your time and wisdom with everybody today. For those of you that have tuned in, thank you for spending an hour with us. Before you completely log off, one heads up that a pop-up will appear with 2 questions about the webinar, and we'd appreciate your feedback to the survey. And so we will say goodbye, but stay on for a few more moments and please complete those 2 questions. And then finally, there will be a link that will be shared of the session with you via the email you used to register. We'd appreciate if you share that link with friends and fellow students. And so thank you once again. Thanks to CFI, and have a great day, everyone. Take care.